to Corporate Cafecito, a podcast based on professional development, career growth, and respecting our cultural identity. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Corporate Cafecito, where we highlight different Latins, whether they are in corporate, whether they are on TV as news anchors, whether they are small businesses, entrepreneurs, everybody, because one of the beautiful things about our community is that we are diversity within diversity, and we could do anything. In Mexico, somos muy dicharacheros, and one of the dichos is zapatero tus zapatos. And so it's very awesome to have a zapatera with us. Her name is Vanessa Arroyo. She's also from Chicago, born and raised. She just went to the wrong high school. But if you could overlook that, she has an amazing shoe line. And so I'm so excited that you're here with us. So tell us a little bit about you growing up, or what got you into becoming a zapatera.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me here and using this platform to share a part of that story. And it's a really long story, actually. It probably, you could say it started as far back as my upbringing when I learned to make clothes. That's really where this passion to use machines and my hands to create things for me to wear. And I sewed my hand for a really long time until my father said, "Hey, old school." And then my dad's like, I know how to sew with a machine. I'll just teach you. I was like, all right. Really bad at it at first, but got better. And then I liked working with the machine so much that I started asking my grandfather, who worked at a luggage factory. He would make luggage, leather luggage, over by, what is it, like the Noble Square area. There used to be a couple of factories there.
Yep.
It was called Wellington Suitcase Company. I would beg him to take me to work. And I was a young teenager, like really little, like I shouldn't have been at work. And I went with him a few times, and I was just like, this is so dope.
I love it.
I love it. And that's really where it started. I shifted my whole focus on making things and working with my hands. So that's really where the seed was planted.
It sounds like the seed was planted even like pre you, like if this was a trade that your grandfather had, and I always joke that none of us can play a musical instrument because no one in my family is very musical, but it feels like you guys, maybe your whole family has been creators or like makers.
That's a really good point, and it's true. My grandmother, I later found out that she was a seamstress in Mexico. She was the person that everyone would go to get the bautizo vestuario done. Yeah, exactly. And they were in a small town in Guerrero, so, we're talking like no electricity type of situation. So she was able to make it work with one of those old school machines that you use like two pedals and you crank it with your hand. So you're right. It really just, the seed was planted through my ancestors.
Yeah, they're just like we make stuff.
Exactly.
So, born and raised in Chicago, she went to Whitney Young.
Yes, I did. Dolphins.
But then you decided to pursue like fashion, right?
Yeah.
So you went into the fashion world. Tell us about that.
Well, it's
because it sounds very sexy, and I know her story, so I know it's
okay.
Not gonna be sexy, but yeah.
Right. There's a very sexy side to it and a very non-sexy side to it, and I like both. Whitney Young actually has a fashion program that a lot of people don't know about, and that really wasn't my original plan. I was such a nerd. I'm like a science nerd. Nice. But then I just decided to go to college
should have gone to Lane.
Right. I know. I heard you have a really nice science program there. And like a botany class with a greenhouse. Yes. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay. See, I remember. I actually worked at the Nature Museum for like 6 years. Such a nerd. And I was like, this is just something that I like to do. I don't know. And I couldn't decide. I felt like I went against all of my family's wishes of like all of a sudden pursuing a creative career instead of going to school to become a scientist, or like my plan was to be a restoration ecologist, like very specific because I love being in nature. So people will know that. People who are my close friends will know that I spend a lot of time in nature, barefoot. Like I love bugs and animals, and a mí no me da cosa. Like,
a mí sí me da cosa. But I love being in nature, and then I'm like, oh, too much nature.
Okay, see that I'm like the opposite. So it's funny because my nickname in high school was Little Sucia, and that sounds a little sexy, right? But it's so not sexy. It's because these hands, the mud, the dirt, I love being, like I love mountain climbing and doing all of that dirty, like tomboyish stuff. But yeah, so I decided to go to college for fashion design.
Nice.
And I was really good at it. Columbia College.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. I'm just like, I felt like I was a natural. I worked in the industry like while I was in college, so that secured me a job as an apparel designer for a company here in Chicago. I stayed there for less than a year because as soon as I graduated, I was like, I need something bigger than this. And I had never been to New York, but I knew that that's where I wanted to go. So I got a one-way ticket. I know, and I landed, and I was
your
like,
Wellington suitcase.
Yeah, that's right, and said goodbye. I was ready to leave. I just was not happy here. But that job really opened my eyes to the manufacturing.
Can I ask why you weren't happy here?
I was in a really bad place. Just, I was unhappy with the circle that I was around. I was really bored. And I feel like we grow up with a lot of traumas. So there was a lot of healing there that I internalized. Yeah. And I was ready to just like spread my wings and let it go. And I did that.
I always, I feel that sometimes it becomes very, and I ask that because the comfort zone of staying where you are can be very comfortable of like, this is my neighborhood. These are the people I hang out with. This is my family. This is what we do. And on Sundays we do this. And on Fridays we eat that. And I think that there's like a comfort that comes with that. But I think that at a certain point in maybe our careers, our lives, or our dreams, we're like maybe overwhelmed or maybe underwhelmed of like, I could do more, or I can reach higher, or, if I don't leave now, I'm never going to leave.
Totally. I feel that. And I've always been a traveler. Like, one thing about my parents, so they had me when they were teenagers. I don't have any siblings, but my upbringings were rough, just like any other Latino household. Being first generation, both of my parents were born in Mexico. You live in multi-gen homes where there's a lot of families in a really small space, and the ups and downs that go with that are just super challenging. But one thing about like my parents, especially my mom, she raised a very independent person. So like, as soon as I could just leave the house by myself, I would do that. I was not scared to just travel alone at a really young age. I was a teenager and I was just like booking trips. And my mom's like, what do you mean you're going? You know someone there? Like, yeah, my girl. And yes, it was my girl. Like I wasn't lying to her. But that's also like what kind of pushed me to move Chicago. So that job actually had me travel to India, and that was like a really big eye-opener for me. That was like, whoa, I'm seeing what happens in the fashion industry. And a lot of my friends didn't have jobs like that. Honestly, what got me that position was my work ethic. I'm just a hard worker. Yeah. Like, yes, I have talent, but you can't just have talent alone.
No, you have to be able to do it.
Yeah, and I've always worked. I love working. I'm telling you, like, how I used to like going to work with my grandpa, like at a factory, So I like to keep busy.
So you're in New York, right? Like, I'm assuming you wear all black and go to fun parties.
Right. You know me, man. I do wear all black.
So how was it there?
So it was, you know what? It was interesting.
It's like Sex in the City, right?
Yeah. Well, I actually had something lined up, and that company filed for bankruptcy, and I had already put in a notice for my job, and I had an apartment in Pilsen. I had ended that lease, and I was like ready to go in, and called me one day, and I was like, well, what am I gonna do? It was with Betsy Johnson before she like,
oh no.
Yeah, there was like a really low dip that she hit during that year.
But wow, that you were hired by Betsy Johnson.
Yes.
Like, that's huge.
It was dope. I had someone I knew there connected me, and I had an in. At the time, what year was it? Like 2011, to be like between 11 and 12. Everyone loved Betsy. All of a sudden, all the Y2K, all the younger generations, there's like the trend going on now. Everyone loves Betsy. But back then we were like the OG Betsy's. We had like the prom dresses. It was the whole Y2K thing.
I had this dress, and it was like a spaghetti strap black dress, but it had like all these like beautiful colors on it, and it was fun. And I was like, oh, that was my favorite cumbia dress.
Oh my God, yes. No, that's awesome. We love Betsy here. So, but yeah, she filed for bankruptcy, and I was like, well, what am I going to do? And I was like, screw it. I have a ticket, and I said I was going to go, so I'm going to go. Mind you, I didn't have a place to stay. I literally flew in, stayed on my friend's couch for like 2 days. Back then, Craigslist. I didn't have an iPhone, BlackBerry. I found a spot on Craigslist, and I just started sending my resume. Like, as soon as I got there, I had a bunch of interviews lined up, and then someone at Rag & Bone reached out to me. And New York was so cool from the moment that I got off the plane. I was like, oh my God, this is like, oh my gosh, I love New York so much. I love going back, and any excuse to go back, I'm there. I took the first offer that I got, which was actually a paid internship, but I didn't even last like a month before that turned into an assistant position. They had to create a job for me because they didn't have a position that existed prior to me being there. But they offered me, they were like, we really like you and want to hire you, but we want you to join our footwear team. Are you kidding me? I love shoes. I was like, this is even better than clothes. I just never thought it was a possibility. Yeah. So I was there a few hours, and then I had a retail job because, I dreamed big, but I didn't dream that big. I didn't think that I was going to get hired there full time. So I was working at Urban Outfitters part-time when I wasn't there because I knew that I would for sure be able to design for Urban, which they offered me a position. Awesome. And then I was like, I don't want to design for that. I'm going for Rag. So next thing you know, I'm designing luxury footwear with a team of like 4 people. And it was a dream come true. It really was.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so how do you get from that to going to León?
Yeah.
To making zapatos here now?
Well, I'm like is this interesting to people? Because I feel like, wow, for the fashion people out there, this is really just a crazy story.
You know why it's interesting? And I think it's because when we think about how do I launch a footwear brand, I don't know where to start. I wouldn't know how to start one. I wouldn't know how to search for the materials or how to like create a shoe. And it looks easy, right? Like we all wear shoes. We know what they look like. But then to know like how they come to life or like how you do it and how do you get the idea and what doesn't work and like how did these get to market? You just see all these things and it's so interesting. And I think it's also very like a source of pride to be like, but you mastered the craft and now you're on your own.
Yeah. Well, I was working at Rag for, I don't know, I want to say like 7 years, 7 years. During the end of that, that's when I started getting really bored. It was just redundant. The fashion industry, yes, it's cutthroat. It's everything that you see on TV.
Like the devil wears Prada.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And it can be like the worst of the worst, or it could be like on the lower end of the worst, but it's always really intense. And when I came on board, it was May. We were preparing for Fashion Week, which happens in September. So the collection had already been designed, and we were just like fine-tuning everything because it takes a really long time to design a collection. You're designing a year ahead for whatever's going to come out next year. So the shoes were the shoes were already designed, they were being made, they were on their way. There's always an issue, I swear. And I think it happens with any industry where you're creating a product.
Right.
And, you have all these like things, balls drop, like just fires that you need to put out. So we designed these really cool shoes for the runway. They had already been designed. I had nothing to do with that. I was just doing product development at that point. They went on the runway, but buyers like Saks, Neiman's, Barney's. So what happens is Fashion Week, you have the runway show, and you have a lot of like a combination of important people that are there, not just like now there's influencers. Right. You have buyers, you have like the people who are at the top of the retailer chain. So they're there and they're scoping out the collection, because as soon as Fashion Week is over, you go to market. Mm-hmm. So you do a showroom and you have to set everything up. So half of the shoes that you see on the runway go to PR and they get sent to celebrities. And then the other half you have to put in the showroom, because the buyers are coming back with their notes. You see people like on like taking notes at shows, or whatever it is that they're doing. That's because they go back to market and they place their orders that they're going to put in their store shelves. And at that point, all of this is happening with samples, like salesman samples, PR samples. You don't have the actual product made yet, because it's going to take a year. That's why you do all of this a year ahead of time.
So after the fashion show, that's when you actually start production?
No. So you need to, so everything happens so quick. So you kind of have everything lined up, and you have you want to make sure that the factories are able to do recreate the styles. But you have to wait until the orders are placed to see how much materials you need and how many pairs it's going to yield and all of that. So it's not until they place their orders that you can start with production, but you can't waste time. So this whole time in between, you're working on like fine-tuning the product.
Gotcha.
So really what led me to wanting to take a course in Mexico was because we had one season a crazy return on footwear that was faulty. So it was like $600 pairs of shoes that looked great on the runway, but when they were on the store shelves, the heels were breaking. Just, things like that were happening. They had to go to sample sale.
I love sample sales.
I love sample sales. I love them too. Yeah. So
for those of you who don't know what a sample sale is, I'll give you my definition, and then Vanessa, you join in. But it's when a brand has a bunch of either samples or things they couldn't sell, and they'll set up like a store in like a warehouse for a day. And so I would go to the Puma ones because I love Pumas.
Yeah.
And they would have like the shorts for $5, the shoes for like $5 to $10, and I don't even know how to find these sample sales. I feel like before it was easier before we had the internet, because they would do flyers.
Right.
And now I'm like, I'm not getting served ads. I don't know where they are. Right. I love a sample sale.
That's a great point. And that's something to keep in mind. So for all of you people who work in the industry, we need to get these sample sales targeted.
I'm like, I still want to buy them.
I know. Yeah. But that's exactly what a sample sale is. With a combination of like one-offs, clearly faulty product, but people don't care. People do it because of the label and the following that you have as a brand. And so, work was challenging. I tried getting my job to send me to FIT. Like on the weekends, they were like, we don't have a budget for that. The Fashion Institute to take a footwear class. Mind you, it was really expensive. It was. But I was like, I shot my shot. Didn't happen. I was like, well.
Bye.
Yeah, I was like, well, can I take. So then someone that I actually worked with and met along the way had worked in Leon for some time. This Brazilian guy, because they realized that we were having a lot of production issue. And they had to hire someone that we can't just all be like, oh, we're designing. We need someone who knows what they're talking about, someone that's been in the game for a while. So that's when there were a lot of changes in the company. They hired someone. he was a very knowledgeable person. And so he told me, he was like, you should go take a class in Mexico, because what you're going to spend here or in Italy, you're going to just enjoy it out there way more.
Yeah, the food's good.
Yeah. Parents are Mexican.
Yeah.
And
you know the language.
Right. So then
I only have one beef with Mexican shoes.
Okay, what is it?
And so everyone in Mexico who makes shoes, I need you to hear, women have big feet sometimes. And Mexican shoes, like once you get past like size 5, Mexican size 5, you can't find them. Like 6 or 7s, I'm like, forget it.
Yeah, it's funny because I tell them, the people that I work with out there about our feet, they don't believe it. They're like, people in the U.S. have like really nice, narrow, small feet. And I'm just like, bruh, we walk everywhere. Like, our feet are wide by the end of the day. Like, they're small.
I'm like, I'm a size 10.
Yeah.
Like, I need size 10 shoes. So.
Yeah, I feel that. So... mental note.
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends that don't fit into my shoes, and it's just, it's a cost effective to not make bigger sizes. So I do want to improve our size inclusivity, and I think that really just is going to happen with time, because there's no way. Everything's an investment. So to crack these molds in the bigger sizes, it's like you need money for that. So yeah. But
so you go to Leon.
Yeah,
you're taking this class.
I took a course. I was
How
like,
long?
well, it was just 4 weeks.
Okay.
And then I went back. They're like, yeah, your job is here waiting for you when you come back.
Oh, nice.
I went back to New York, but I said, I'm going to Mexico full time, and I did.
Oh.
I was like, screw it. I don't want to be there anymore. I don't want to be in New York. I just had a moment about my identity. And I was just having all of these crazy moments. I was 26 or 27. And it would just hit me like that was the age. It just hit me like a lot of things were making sense. And I had questions about my family. And I really was just soaking it all in. So I knew that I wanted to stay. I went back to New York for a minute and wrapped everything up, but I moved back like within just a handful of months.
Nice. So you go to Mexico, legal questions. Did you go down there on like a visa with like a work permit, or did you just kind of go?
I got my nationality.
Oh, okay, good.
So I went as a citizen.
Dual citizenship.
Yeah, because my parents were born there. It was so ridiculous getting it, but I got it.
So I have mine.
Okay,
so I went and I was like, here's my birth certificate with my parents' names on them. Here's my mom's birth certificate. She was born in Durango. Here's my dad's birth certificate. He was born in Jalisco. And I was like, and here's my marriage certificate to show like my name had changed. And he goes, do you have your parents' marriage certificate? And I was like, what? And he's like, yep, you need it. So, oh my God.
Yeah, you need it.
Oh my God.
Right? It was a lot of that. And then it was
you have
like,
to go back, make another appointment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Then one of my birth certificates said that my mom was born in Illinois when she wasn't. So they like they had to like cancel
Start
the whole
over.
thing. Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot of that. But because of that, I became not that I wasn't, but I became a whole Mexican. Like I got my IDs, I got my licenses, I applied for scholarships to be able to go to school out there. Just really like full blown just became a Mexican. I was just like, I loved it, and a lot was happening with that too. People are telling you you're not from here. Yeah. What are you doing here? And you're just like, what do you mean?
I am from here.
Yeah, I'm Mexican. And then I came across a lot of people who were really okay. They would kind of pull my leg, but then there were also my friends, and then we would joke about certain things. But then there were some people who just like full blown were like, what are you doing in my town? Huh. I have one of my really good friends. It really just, it's about the person, because now there is a huge influx of like digital nomads. Are you kidding me? Yeah. I'd be pissed too. Yeah. Like all of Mexico City is gentrified. Totally. Like what is this? Yeah. So I get that part, but I also felt it was years ago. It was like before any of this happened, and I was internalizing a lot of the things that people were telling me, and to the point where I started to believe it, and I felt like I wasn't allowed to call myself Mexican. Then you come over here, and then you're clearly Mexican. Yeah, my friend will be like,
Vanessa Arroyo, Mexican, right?
Right,
Cool. Yeah,
exactly. My really good friend out there, he was like, just born and raised Leon. He's like, it's Mexican, not Mexican. Just tell them that. And I also had green hair at the time, so a lot of people would call me gringa just to be funny.
So
I embraced it.
You finished that program.
Yeah.
And then when did you start Seres?
Seres didn't happen until around the pandemic time.
Okay, so you were bored at home?
A bit. When I tell you a lot of crazy things started happening in my personal life, it really just like flipped around. It did like my world was turned upside down from one day to the next. And I found myself in Chicago taking some time to heal what was happening, because it really did not have an end at that point in my life. So I spent a chunk of time in Mexico. I was working out there for companies. I was doing tech design. I was doing commercialization. I finished that first program, but then I kept going back to school for one thing or another. And I had a lot of friends who had lines, like fashion lines of their own, but they were, my really good friend who is like a sister to me now, she was in Mexico City and she needed someone to oversee her production in León. So since I was there full time, that's what I was doing.
I got it.
Yeah, and like I still talk to her till this day. Her family just became my family. I had to leave Mexico, left my things over there. I didn't know what was gonna happen. The pandemic hit. I had just gotten back from moving my things out of storage, and they were like, you can't leave. I remember it was like a Friday the 13th when like the lockdown started. It was weird times. I'm not happy thinking about it, but during that time...
Oh my God, was it Friday the 13th?
I remember it was like March, Friday the 13th. Yeah. I was like, this is crazy. Yeah. So then I just stayed here, and I think we were all like in freeze mode for a minute.
Yeah.
Then when we started kind of like getting out of that, that's when I was like, nah, I'm gonna start a shoe company because I think I'm gonna stay in Chicago full time. My grandfather had just gotten diagnosed with cancer, and yes, he did pass away from it, but at the time I was able to appreciate that because it was a big hit on me.
Yeah,
I was taking care of him a lot.
He's the first person you talked about when you started this. Yeah.
I know. So then I was just like, you know what? I'm going to have to do all of the nitty-gritty things that I don't really like to do, but I'm going to do all of that now so that when we get the opportunity to travel, I'm just going to go back to Mexico and see what happens. Like, see who's serious about this, because I talk to so many people about this, and it's hard to get people on board. It's so hard, especially with, like, Mexican culture. It's different, and you have to get used to that. I've talked to a lot of people who've tried manufacturing. They're just like, how do you do it? Because I struggle so much. And I'm just like, the key is relationship building. That's what it is.
I saw this quote, and I understood it, like, and I think when you're talking about this, it like reminds me. It says there's people in your corner, and there's people who have your back, and they're very different, right? Like, so you have like the people who are like cheering you on, right? They're in your corner, but the people who show up when you have to do like those production runs or when you're doing the nitty gritty stuff that no one thinks it's sexy, like that's the difference. I was like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, and you need both.
You need both. Yeah,
you do. So, I did everything. We can go on and on. I had to get the trademark. Someone was fighting me, trying to get me to not use Seres. Then, I had to figure out how I'm going to form my business entities, talk to lawyers. How am I going to become an importer? All of that stuff that I don't do for a living. I had to just start, diving headfirst into it. And I'm glad that I did it because I don't want to, not that I don't do it anymore. I still do, but it just becomes easier. Yeah. But at first it was just like, damn, like I want to focus on designing shoes and like, la, 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 but nah, you can't do that.
Well, you know what? I think we would love to have you back to talk about that stuff. Because to me, like hearing your story of like from where you started to where you are, I think is really inspirational. And I think if you have time to come back, would love to. I think that like now it's like the education portion of how do you start that and how do you build it? That would be lovely. And I think something that everyone would really appreciate. Yeah,
so. Especially the people who are into like the whole fashion thing. Yeah. So yeah, definitely. Thank you.
No, thank you, Vanessa. And join us next time on Corporate Cafecito. As you can see, I'm out, which means Vanessa did most of the talking. But thank you for joining us. Y aquí los esperamos la próxima vez.
Thank you.
Bye.